This is about large-scale awareness and large-scale implementation. So the hospital, and Lisa McDowell is a really beautiful example of this. I won't get into her whole story, but she's a renowned nutritionist, worked for the U.S. Olympics, a number of professional sports teams, etc. And through a personal story of her own, which I'll let you gotta go watch the film to see the whole story, but she ends up building the first working farm on a hospital campus in the United States with a farmer that is paid as a full-time farmer, and they are transforming the way that hospital grows food and thinks about integrated nutrition as a way of healing their patients. So they're growing food in a way that is both reversing disease and preventing disease.
Today, we are joined by Oliver English. He's a filmmaker, a chef, and a food advocate. Thanks for joining us, Oliver.
Thank you so much for having me, Katie. I appreciate it. Good to be with you.
You too. And you're joining us from California, right?
Yes, Venice Beach, California. I am originally an East Coaster from Boston and went to school in upstate New York and lived in New York City for many years. But as you can tell, I don't mind the sunshine out here.
Yeah, as you can tell, I'm a little bit chilly. I usually have the heater turned off, so hopefully it's not making any extra noise. But I am in Woodstock. We're in Woodstock. And just a little bit about the Woodstock Film Festival. We have our 25th year coming up, and there's an early bird deadline. So if you happen to be a filmmaker, definitely look into it. Submit your film earlier rather than later. There's a better chance that it'll get in. And so don't wait till the last minute.
It's a wonderful film festival. I would definitely recommend it. We were there last year for our first time, and it was just an incredible group of people and a lot of fun overall. So strong recommendation. You did not tell me to say that, nor did you pay me to say that, but I just wanted to share that with the folks.
Thanks for the plug. And, for the film festival itself, we always kind of start off with your film, obviously, was Feeding Tomorrow. And it's a featured documentary, and it was in the festival. And then you also not only did a wonderful screening and a Q&A, but you also did a fundraiser at White Feather Farm here out in Socrates, and it was for the Small Farm Resiliency Fund. So let's first get into your background and how you came to make the film.
Absolutely. So our partner on that event was also the American Farmland Trust, which we can get into in a little bit, but it was really incredible to see all these pieces come together. And so I came from the world of restaurants and hospitality for many, many years. I grew up in a family of chefs. I joke that I grew up on the banquettes of my parents' restaurant, in Boston when I was very young. And I grew up, designing, developing, and opening restaurants for many years professionally. I studied hospitality at Cornell, which is why I was in upstate New York. And, I fell in love with the world of food and restaurants. And I was pretty sure that's what I was going to do for the rest of my life. Up until 7 years ago, when I was opening a restaurant in Abu Dhabi, of all places. And I would go and I had my three-piece suit on, kind of a different earlier version of myself. And I would go and train the staff and get the restaurant up and running. One night I was sitting at the bar and I ordered a big steak frite, side salad, whole big spread. And I looked down at all the food and I kind of had this moment where I was like, wait a minute, where did all this food come from? How did it get here? And I'd been out there for weeks or a couple months and, I hadn't seen a farm, hadn't seen a fresh body of water, kind of this arid environment. And I asked our chef to come out and we ended up having a long conversation about where each one of the ingredients came from. It was 6+ ingredients from many, many countries all over Europe, the United States, one from Australia. And we talked about, when the tomato was harvested or when this, where the steak came from. And ingredient by ingredient, we talked about the boats, planes, and trains it took to get there. And then I saw how much food was being wasted. And kind of embarrassingly, in that moment, I realized that I had never really asked the question, where does food come from? I never thought that it may have a broader impact on the world around us. And from someone like me who came from a background, so immersed in food and hospitality and studying in school and working for all these other, chefs, to be so disconnected was kind of shocking. And I started asking some buddies back in New York, where do you think the blueberries are from? And they would say, the grocery store. And I was like, there's a bigger disconnect here. Fast forward 3 months, I was opening another restaurant in the Bahamas, and the same thing. The produce was looking kind of sad in the walk-in, and I sought out a local farmer, and I ended up meeting this farmer named Sakane, who would radically transform the trajectory of my life and my life's purpose. And he had a love and passion and joy for food and farming that was inspiring, to say the very least. He explained to me how deeply interconnected food was to all aspects of our lives, from our health to the environment to society more broadly. And he also shared with me what a powerful role food could be to help solve all these challenges that we're facing. And after this, I called my brother Simon, who was the co-director with me on the film, also the cinematographer and editor. But he was just at the New York Film Academy at that time. And he said, "This guy sounds amazing. Tell him we're going to come film an interview with him." I was like, "I have no idea how to do that. What do you mean?" And he's like, "Well, we should film an interview with him." He was kind of an early environmentalist as well. And I said, "Sakani, I'll be back in 3 months." He said, "All right, man, that's cool." Probably thought I was crazy, which, it kind of was. And we came back 3 months later and filmed our first interview with Sakane and the family he was working with about this piece of land that they were transitioning to help create more healthy food for the community in the Bahamas. And after that weekend, we said, more people need to meet farmers. And through the lens of the restaurant business, we can help people, hopefully, it was early on, hopefully we can help people see the world in a more interconnected light and understand the powerful role that we can play in creating positive change in the world around us through food. And that was the early hypothesis, I guess you could call it.
It's great seeing that. And every once in a while, you'll see somebody who's really into it. Like I watched Jamie Oliver just for his ideas. And sometimes he has some really amazing things on there. And recently he had the chef for the first zero waste restaurant in London. I thought, how is that even possible? It's like, how do you have zero waste because just the nature of how everything's packaged? And the way you have zero waste is you grow it there clearly. And then what are other ways we could have like a zero waste restaurant, or how is that even implemented?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is one of the hardest things to date that even I deal with now today. And out in Los Angeles, and for years before, I've been running pop-up dinners, originally in college with a group called Cornell Underground, and then since then in various different formats. But I've always loved, and even though I'm not in the hospitality business anymore, I've always loved the power of storytelling and bringing people together. I think films and food represent some of the most powerful vehicles for storytelling and for change. And ones that are beautiful and delicious and exciting as well, which is like a really important part of getting people to care about the world around them. The zero waste thing is really hard. Even when I do dinners out here, it is the one thing that I continually struggle with. I use as much, reusable plastic and containers as much as possible. I go to the farmer's market as much as I possibly can. But going to the grocery store, there just is waste. And for a restaurant, they are able to sort of do things on a more industrial scale. For me, if I'm doing a pop-up dinner, it is more challenging because everything is, new and just done sort of that for that dinner. And so I have not cracked the nut on zero waste yet. The best we can do is buy as much from the farmers as possible, which coincidentally is also the most sustainable and healthy. So all of these things are deeply interconnected, and I'm constantly looking for ways to get better and more efficient in that way.
Yeah, that's great. So getting back to the film where you address so many issues, and when you do, your film is Feeding Tomorrow. And just to get people excited, we're going to show the trailer so that you can, get a sense of the filmmaking aspect of it and just the storytelling.
Music, they say, is the universal language. I think food is. Food is the one global unifier. Everybody can sit down around a table and enjoy good food.
I'm most fearful that our children won't have the opportunity to experience that.
As a species, what are we doing with our time? How are we consuming this planet?
50% of the planet's habitat is gone because of our agriculture.
People don't have a connection to what food really is and where it really comes from.
To scale our current consumption to 10 billion people is simply manifestly impossible. We don't have the arable land for that. We don't have water resources. In other words, we will be forced to change direction.
So in the food movement, the critical thing is connecting the dots between all of these different issues: health, food access, the environment.
This system over here is going to produce food, fuels, medicines, and fibers in perpetuity forever, while increasing the fertility of the soil, increasing the biodiversity. And do you hear the toads creaking off in the background? I hope you do. And the toads are eating my pests.
As a hospital system, we should be leaders in what healthy food looks like. We believe food is medicine in that it can prevent disease, or if you do have a disease, it can reverse it.
We believe that if we connect the learning around food and nutrition to other learning, that it will stick more, and that we will have folks when they leave here who are more likely to make stronger choices around the food that they consume.
We need to begin to investigate every aspect of our lives. And let's start with what's on the plate tonight for dinner.
There are a lot of films about this subject. So how did you, with your brother, decide what to tackle? I mean, it started with this, your experience in the Bahamas, which is such a great way to start something, because that's sort of like the micro, and the small farm. You've got the mangoes, you've got the coconuts, you've got the avocados. I mean, you have everything you could ever really need. Those are my 3 favorite foods, by the way, in case you didn't know, to make food. And then you've got the seafood. The Caribbean is just like its own amazing thing. So to me, that was such an interesting place to start and a great place to start. And that story really was like the setting. And then how did you sort of figure out like how to address, because there's so many issues. We just talked about one, food waste. And then there's so many issues. How did you piece it together?
Absolutely. I mean, it was a multi-year process of learning and discovery and trial and error. If I were to tell you that, we knew exactly what we were doing from the very beginning, that would not be the truth. We, through the lens of the restaurant business, we really just sought out initially innovators in the front lines of creating positive change in the food system. So we cast kind of a big net in the beginning, and it was, again, after learning from Sakonic sort of how this idea of the interconnectedness of food, we were looking at healthcare, entrepreneurs, environmentalists, even organizations that were rehabilitating cons to help them, give them culinary skills to get back on their feet. We really cast a broad net, and that also included beekeepers who were repopulating the bee population around the country. And so we really cast a broad net in the beginning. And what we ultimately came to is there's so many amazing films out there that I love and have been inspired by, that you, I'm sure, have seen many of them, who have really gone into one particular area or subject matter and really honed in on that. This one's about soil and regenerative ag. This one's about healthcare. This one's about food access. For us, what we were trying to do from the very beginning was to explain to people, and not in a way that made them feel bad about not knowing this, because we didn't know this, and that was kind of the point, but to explain and show people how deeply interconnected the food system is with every part of our lives. And so we eventually, after interviewing all these amazing people, and it was really just this, we would interview one person and they would say, oh, you got to go talk to this person. You got to read this book. You got to listen to this podcast. And we would. And then I'd reach out to that person. Oh, you got to do this. And so for the first couple of years, it was just honestly shooting from the hip. And eventually, after we interviewed enough people, we realized that there were sort of these 3 big buckets that we wanted to talk about, these 3 sort of main areas, that there are other things that obviously go into the future of food, but the 3 areas that we wanted to really focus on and tell the stories of 3 sort of protagonists through personal stories were agriculture, healthcare, and education. And those are the most big and obvious things that impact our daily lives. The first is obviously agriculture, and the food system and the environment are deeply connected. How we grow food and how we treat the earth with respect to how we grow food is a microcosm of how we treat the environment and think about our relationship with the environment more broadly. For a long time, we have been destroying and degrading the quality of our soil, our air, and polluting the planet in an effort to grow crops at a maximum yield, just with profit as the only metric. That has had a significant amount of negative externalities, health-wise, environmentally, climate-wise, societally. So we look at agriculture, and we look at a visionary farmer named Mark Shepard, who transforms and creates a new vision for restorative, regenerative, holistic agriculture and agroforestry, which are all words that basically mean working with nature to enhance the ecosystem through time, to grow healthy food that benefits our own bodies, but also benefits the environment through time. In healthcare, Obviously, we know that there are mounting healthcare problems in our country, and so much of that is tied to not only the food that we eat, but the food that we grow. And those are also deeply connected. So we found an amazing woman, Lisa McDowell, who builds the first working farm on a hospital campus and is getting back to the idea. I don't want to give too much away, but
I wanted to get into that just because I think that right there is because the film is a solution-oriented piece, and you're showing people that have solutions. Like you have Brooklyn Grange in there, and you have which they do the rooftop farming. Can you just really quick go into that piece, because I think that is massive. Like everybody's seen the rooftop gardens, you've seen the urban farms, but to build a farm, say it again, in a hospital, if that is not like the most like just absolute epitome of a solution, can you just expand on that just a little bit more?
Absolutely. And so you're absolutely right. The film broadly, and we realized that, yeah, there's a lot of things that are messed up for sure, but we wanted to focus on solutions and say, here are tangible, practical solutions that exist today. They've been around for years, of working situations that they work, and it's not some tech solution some years in the future that we don't know how to do it. We have the solutions today, right now. This is about large-scale awareness and large-scale implementation. So the hospital, and Lisa McDowell is a really beautiful example of this. I won't get into her whole story, but she's a renowned nutritionist, worked for the U.S. Olympics, a number of professional sports teams, etc. And through a personal story of her own, which I'll let you got to go watch the film to see the whole story, but she ends up building the first working farm on a hospital campus in the United States with a farmer that is paid as a full-time farmer, and they are transforming the way that hospital grows food and thinks about integrated nutrition as a way of healing their patients. So they're growing food in a way that is both reversing disease and preventing disease. And it is a profound truth that we all know the term, let thy food be thy medicine. It's been said in cultures and people all around the world for generations, thousands of years. And we have gone so far away from that, particularly in this country, particularly in the last 100 years. And so this is a return to a simple idea whose time has come. And it is a powerful example of the kinds of solutions that are already out there that we can implement in small and larger scales all around the country. The program has been so successful since filming there that several other hospitals in their program are looking to implement this idea in their hospital around the country as well. It has had a profound impact. They built a farmer's market inside the hospital. So you come down in the lobby and you go into the hospital.
Where is this?
No, it's fine. Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Wow.
And you would be, because the story really is like anyone who's been to the hospital, unfortunately, has seen, the food that they give you when you're in the hospital is quite literally the food that is giving you cancer and making you sick. And so, and even the food that they serve in the hospital is also the same food that is representative of the larger American food system that is giving you cancer and making you sick.
Yeah, I call it the sick care system. The sick care system.
The sick care system.
If you're in a hospital and they're giving you the food that's making you sick, I mean, that's even more, direct and clear. So the fact that they were able to pull that off is also incredible, because most hospitals are just, there's a hospital here in this area and they had a huge scandal because they're really either, mismanaged or owned by some giant corporation, and they're like big ag. It's like big hospital, it's kind of like so big. The fact that it is potentially going to go in other hospitals is incredible. Here's an example that I give of how something never got really replicated. The Whole Foods that was in Brooklyn has an urban farm inside of the Whole Foods. Why is that not everywhere? It's a net zero Whole Foods. Why is that not everywhere? And it's been there for 10 years, and it was because of Hurricane Sandy happened. And so they were able to get something like that built. People were responding to the situation, but we have the capacity to do these things. The question is, why is it not happening? And the solutions piece is really important, because I feel like we're constantly getting like fear-mongered. There's nothing left. We can't, and yes, there is definitely a balance that can happen. Do you feel like through this film, you felt like a much greater understanding? Is that something that you felt like has happened since screening this film?
A great understanding of the solutions and the possibilities.
Solutions and the possibilities. I mean, we all know the problems. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's pretty obvious at this point.
Yeah, we have been, and at this point, we've screened the film, at film festivals, and we've done 2 screenings at COP27 and COP28, both UN climate conferences in Egypt and in Dubai the past 2 years. The response has been profound. The response has been, if people don't like it, maybe they don't tell us, but for the people who like it and do get it, and most people have, at this point, unfortunately, some connection to a relative or a family member or a spouse who has had cancer or had a terrible ailment or been through one of these challenges or has obesity or diabetes and feels a deep personal resonance to this idea. And that's a lot of the feedback that we've gotten. Every time we screen this, someone says, wait, this is amazing. This is obvious. This needs to happen at this hospital. This needs to happen at this school. Let's grow some food in the front yard. And so I think what we really wanted to do in creating this film was not to preach to the choir. There's a community of folks, environmental folks, et cetera, who already get these messages, who watch 1,000 environmental films, and that's amazing, and I love them, and that's great. But that's not who we need to reach in order to achieve a significant impact on the overall environmental and health movement. We need to reach several concentric circuits. We need to broaden the tent. We need to broaden the tent, and we need to bring more people into the conversation of all backgrounds, geographic landscapes, socioeconomic classes, and political stripes. And to do that, we need to find a commonality in a subject and in a vision for this country that gets people on board. And there is no greater freedom than having a healthcare system and a food system that promotes long-term longevity and health for humanity. There is no greater freedom than the ability for a country to produce and sustain their own food system and to feed and pay the farmers who produce that food and to enhance the long-term ability for us to be here on this planet through the way that we grow food. And the food system offers, and as we show in the film, a deeply interconnected opportunity for us to transform the fundamental way that we grow food. And in so doing, our relationship with the planet. And when we do that, we start to grow food in a way that is, once again, nourishing and healing and regenerative. And that is for the planet and for our own bodies. And so I am incredibly encouraged by all of the screenings we've done and also spending time. The benefit of being the filmmaker is my favorite part is being out there on the farm with these people. My brother and I, will tell you that it's the same thing. And we've really gotten to know Lisa and Mark and Thabiti. I was texting with Thabiti today. He finally watched the film and he's really happy about it. So that made me happy. But we've had the opportunity to know these people and meet these people and be deeply inspired by them. And what it shows us as well is, none of these folks came from a huge, amount of means or endorsements or, resources. They said, the system in my community, in my part of the world, is broken. I'm going to go ahead and make a new system. I'm going to go create a new working model for what can be. And I'm going to show people how we can do things differently. And that, to me, is profoundly inspiring. And one of the things that we hope to inspire in this film is, and we talk about it at the end with certain calls to action that people can take in their daily lives to be part of a more sustainable food system. We give you individual things you can do, but also encourage you to think about your own business, your own household, the politicians you elect, and ask serious questions about what values do they have and what systems do we want to be in place. The current systems, as we know, are driving us down a very dark road and have been doing so for many decades. And that is coming to a head in terms of the large-scale awareness of that and our timetable for being able to change. So what we want to do and what we hope to do is show that we have solutions right now. And it is, again, about the large-scale implementation of those solutions across the entire country and eventually the entire world.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It makes me think about, big ag. You're in California, and big ag with their, I'll just say, almond farms, right? So they have these gigantic farms, that are just, like you said, monoculture. And we all know, if you know anything about regenerative farming or permaculture or anything, you never have monoculture because there's 3 sisters from the indigenous teachings. One plant helps the other, and they all kind of feed off each other. And it's this harmonious giving and taking. And, one will provide, some shade. And so it's interesting that we're still up against these monoculture farms and that we're we are in essence like allowing it to a degree, but then at the same time, we're not corporations. Because I think I wanted to take a part in a piece out of the film. You said, we are doing these things. And I have to disagree with you about that a little bit, because I don't think people in the Caribbean, the people in your film are doing it. I think it's large corporations. And because we are not able to really, through the law or the government, because the government itself is so corrupted and paid for by these larger corporations, that we can't hold them accountable for their monoculture, massive farms that are using all these pesticides, but we can, as you say, through our backyards, like through our choices, through whatever we're doing, build a farm in a hospital, build a farm in a school, all these little things that we can do. That's what's empowering. Because I think watching some of the films from the last 10 or so years, it was just like hammering, we're screwed, and it was like, yes, I need to know that there's monoculture and that these farms are massive and they're just totally, for instance, like a farm in, I grew up in Texas that is growing only corn when there's no water supply. It's a very dry area. It's almost semi-arid. There's still these large, massive, sort of like old school ways of doing things that, watching a movie, you just kind of feel helpless sometimes. But with your film, I just felt like so engaged, and knowing that these small ways of doing things is what's really going to make the impact. And we can't change corporations, unfortunately. I wish we could, but that era is over. And like you said, we're at a head here, and it's now time for us to make the moves, because we can't stop what others are going to do, but we can do little small scale things. And if all of us are doing small scale things, then that actually adds up tremendously. So, for instance, you had Brooklyn Grange in there. I just wanted to get, because we're local, we're in New York, and I've been there before. I just wanted to talk about them. So tell us a little bit about what they did and their solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. And just quickly on your last point, before, you were absolutely right. And we tried really hard not to point the finger. I mean, the system that we've all grown up within has been in place for many decades, and the U.S. is, through federal farm bill subsidies, subsidizing the growth of corn and soy and wheat, which is making these proliferate all around the country. And so we don't try to say you're bad because what you've been doing or because what your mom put on the kitchen table. We've all grown up in a system that is like totally screwed. And so to your point, it's all about, now that we know it, what small steps can we take to move in a different direction? And that is empowering. It really is. And I tell one quick story about being in the restaurant business, and I will answer your question, but this is important about the power of our personal choices. When I was in the restaurant business, I had a manager early on say, if someone makes a comment or a complaint, we assume that 10 to 15 people or 20 people were thinking it, but didn't want to speak up. Why do you have straws? Why did the salmon go off the menu? Whatever it was. If 2 people said that same comment, we made a note in a little book. If 3 people made that comment, we made the change. So we, as a small business, responded to the will of the customer, and that's the reason we were in business. So if enough people speak up, things are changed. And that's true at the grocery store, at the farmer's market, at even corporations to a degree. If enough people at massive scale start to say, this isn't right, then there starts to be a little bit of change. So we are remarkably powerful, and that is true. So I think Brooklyn Grange is a really powerful example of a solution. And I was fortunate enough to meet Anastasia, who actually emailed me today. Again, it's funny that anyways, Anastasia is incredible. I met her through when I was living in New York, and she and her team basically were looking at rooftops, and they said, in New York City, obviously there's not a lot of extra room. There's not a lot of plots of land that are not developed, but there's a lot of rooftop space. And they said, let's go ahead and build a working, organic, soil-based rooftop farm model in the heart of Brooklyn. And they did. And they now have, I think it's the largest rooftop farm by acres in the United States. And I don't know the exact number, but I think it's multiple rooftops all throughout Brooklyn and all throughout New York State. And what they've done is they also host events, they host weddings up there, there's all kinds of things. But what they've done is they've taken a piece of land or a piece of space that was not used and have turned it into an urban ecosystem for growing food. It's also pollinator habitat. In the film, she also talks about the fact that it reduces the heating and cooling needs for the building. So you're reducing your overall energy costs. It retains water when it rains. And it's also just like stunningly beautiful. And also, this is also very important, especially for kids who grow up in cities and don't have, access to a farm or a garden, which is most kids in cities. This is an opportunity for them to interact with the natural world, to see a butterfly, to see a hummingbird, to see where their food comes from in a way that they probably wouldn't have had to otherwise. And that is a powerful idea. And one of the, I guess, hypotheses, you could say, that we had in the beginning of the film was, where does this disconnect start? And how do we fix it? And every single expert that we spoke to in the film, climate scientists, nutritionists, educators, policymakers, entrepreneurs, etc., said we have to connect kids back to food at a young age. It's not rocket science. It might be kind of obvious. I didn't really understand how powerful it was there, but it is true. And if kids, as Ron Finley says, if kids know where kale comes from, kids eat kale. And having that early experience about where a vegetable comes from, the difficulty it takes to grow that vegetable, has a profoundly positive impact on their world and on their very being. So they created a series of farms all around New York. They also help people, I believe, convert their existing their rooftops into green spaces of various kinds. They've got a farmer's market. It's an event space. So it's this place for growing food, but it's also a green space for people to interact with nature, in an urban environment where they probably wouldn't have before. And that is a powerful idea. We were so inspired, in fact, by this idea of connecting kids back to food that during COVID, we helped to build a regenerative school farm at a public middle school out here in Santa Monica. And we turned about a 1/4 acre lot next to the school into a regenerative school farm, and we hired a farmer. And every single kid who goes to that school now has one class, about 30 minutes to an hour, outside on the farm every single week. There are quarterly farm-to-table events. And I've had multiple parents come to me on volunteer days and say, thank you so much. My child never used to eat kale. Now they love kale. My child never used to eat green beans at Thanksgiving, whatever. Now they love green beans. And by the way, here's the compost, because they learned about it in 3rd grade. And I was like,
If you get them early, my husband, who started Me and My Farms, that grows microgreens and mushrooms, he said the same thing. He's like, mushrooms are scary, right? They're like fungi. They look kind of crazy. Kale is kind of like, it's not exciting. These things aren't exciting to kids, but when they get them at like 2nd or 3rd grade, because when they're past that age into high school and junior high, you lost them. But you get them early. And they're like, ooh, mushrooms. Okay, they're kind of weird. Oh, the kale, this is kind of weird, spinach. But if you get them at that age where you're kind of like, telling them that it's like gives them superpowers, and that's what I tell my 7 or, and my 3-year-old. I'm like, mushrooms give you superpowers. They're not quite there yet, but like, they like chicken of the woods. I don't know if you know that when it tastes like chicken, it's like, but I think that is what it's all about, and I appreciate that so much. That last story is incredible, because that is really what it's all about. And I think once we get our future farmers, we get our kids that, you're going to have a couple of geeky kids in there that are like, yes, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. Like, I'm going to do this, and that's how you get them. You get them young, and then that's the answers. It's not necessarily trying to take on some gigantic organization. It's just like starting small.
Why fight the forces that are out there doing that is a waste of energy. We just need to create a new, better, healthier, more equitable, more regenerative model, which we showcase in the film, and let people decide for themselves that that's the way they want to live and be, which I believe is where we are going to absolutely go. We are chronically anxious and overworked and undernourished in this country, and it's coming to a head. It has been for some years, and people are actively understanding that there is a new way to be, which is actually kind of an older way to be if you kind of look at it, but in today's modern age. And we should, and we will grow a more just and equitable society. And food is going to be at the center of that change.
Incredible. Well, on that note, unfortunately, we are out of time, and I want everybody to be able to A, see the film. Where can we see the film? B, connect with you, and C, support you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for asking. So Feeding Tomorrow is available on demand right now on Apple TV, Amazon Prime, and Google Play. Please go watch it. To follow us and follow the journey, you can follow Feeding Tomorrow on Instagram, TikTok, all the things, and also myself at Oliver English. Just one underscore in between Oliver and English. But we are posting frequently about the journey of Feeding Tomorrow. We've got a couple upcoming screenings and events in Los Angeles and around the country, and we'll be doing something in DC as well in the fall, and have a couple other exciting things coming on. But if this is an area of interest to you, if you want to learn more about some of the solutions we talk about in the film and the people we talk about in the film, please reach out to us and share the message. This is a message whose time has come, and it has become very, very clear through the folks that we speak with on a daily basis. And so we are grateful for the Woodstock Film Festival and for you, Katie, for sharing this message, and looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you again.
That's it for the Woodstock Film Festival, Let's Talk Film podcast. And like I said, be sure to like and subscribe. We're also available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and other podcasting platforms. And thank you again to our very special guest, Oliver English. We will see you next time.